Welcome to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Lou Corletto, where you will be supported to remember that you are the driver and not the vehicle, so that you can walk your life in trust. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Lou Corletto. And today I'm really grateful to have a returning guest speaker back. I won't say his name. This guest speaker, the episode aired November 1st, and the title was Your DNA. And this is what he describes as your divine natural abilities. And in that call, he also shared things of the four metrics, happiness and achievements and significance and legacy. And I've asked him to come back to take this deeper, because if we have these divine natural abilities, right, which we do, hence the podcast, right, the art of living, we all have the capacity to live this magical life of your own creation. But if we're not doing it, why not? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So let me share with you why you should pay attention to this conversation, and especially the wisdom this man's going to share. Fortune 100 executives and business leaders around the world consider him their secret weapon to accelerate their income, influence, and impact. He's a certified high-performance coach, a best-selling author, and is recognized as one of America's premier experts and contributions to the field of high performance. Jeffrey is also a global entrepreneur and executive mentor, and he knows that his strategies work in the real world. He has a proven track record of producing and creating number ones, meaning tops of the tops. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the man known as the Catalyst, Mr. Jeffrey Watts.
Hello,
Mr.
Lou.
Watts. Hey, brother.
Great to be with you today.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come back and to continue our conversation. So back on the first, when we talked, you were diving into and sharing this beautiful concept that you call the DNA, right? Our divine natural abilities, what that is, what's going on. And you share these beautiful metrics. And you also dropped a bomb around the core drivers. And that's why I invited you to come back for this, so we can expose that. So, ladies and gentlemen, go back and listen to episode on the first. It aired on the first, but it's called Your DNA with Jeffrey Watts, Your Divine Natural Ability. But since you're here, in case you haven't heard that, Jeff, if you would go ahead and create a summary, a nutshell, so they can at least stay with us as we dive into the core drivers, please.
Sure. Well, and again, I'll reiterate, go back and listen to it, because we spent an hour and really deep dive into your DNA. But, you know, my work with people over the last 30 years almost now, it's been very clear to me that the key to being successful, the key to feeling fulfilled, the key to really being happy with what you're doing on a daily basis is rooted in you utilizing your God-given talents, skills, abilities, aptitudes, all those things that make you uniquely you. And just like you have a unique fingerprint, you have a unique set of all of these gifts that have been poured into you. And your responsibility throughout your life is to hone and to maximize and to perfect your application and your use of those talent, skills, abilities that you've been given. Mm-hmm. And from my world and life view, I believe that those were placed into us to impact the lives of others on this planet, because everything ultimately is about relationships. Mm. And so we talked a lot about your DNA, because that's really you and your relationship with yourself, with that DNA that is within. And then how does that express itself? So we deep dove into that. I thought that was just a great training on that that we shared last time. But the reality with your DNA is this. We all want to be fulfilled. We all want to be happy. We all want to feel like we're making a difference, that, you know what, the planet was better because we were here. And the only way that happens is if you're living out of your strengths instead of focusing on your weaknesses, your challenges, fixing things. And so one of the biggest challenges that I have working with different leaders across the globe is getting them out of fix-it mode. This isn't about fixing what you think is wrong with you. I want us to focus on what is right with you, with inside of each one of us. What is it that's right? What is it that's good? What is it that's pure? What is it that has good intent? What is it that draws people to us when we are in that space, when we are living with integrity in those areas that is uniquely us and what we bring into relationships. And so please hear, if you want to be fulfilled, stop fixing and start living into your strengths.
Nice. A few things that popped when you were sharing that was an old adage that I grew up with, in the sense of that my teachers would share, which is when you talk about people drawing to you when you're expressing this, right? And that is when you catch on fire, people will come watch you burn. Meaning when you show up in your authentic self with enthusiasm and passion,
yes,
then the world comes to you. So you, especially even in a business model, you don't even have to market so much, because you become an attractor, not a beggar, right? Of pulling, I need these people. It's no, they'll come find you because your light shining so bright. They want to know where that source is coming from.
Yeah,
sweet.
Absolutely.
And again, sorry, Jeff, to cut you.
Yeah.
So listeners, as you are engaging in this, if you did not hear the first episode, to be clear, DNA is the acronym that Jeffrey's using for your divine natural abilities. Now, remember, I choose to be clear around this. We're not referring to your genetic structure, right? And please, and please understand, because some people go, oh, I have my DNA and I'm limited by that. One, the old model of genetics has been destroyed decades ago. We are not limited and stuck by these so-called 4 nucleotide chains to that express this genes. It's just the potential. We only need 7% of that genetic structure to recreate you. The other 93% is data storage, meaning we get to open and create and unfold, so that the potential is unlimited. We are not stuck until you start believing that you are. Stuck meaning limited by what your capacities are, right? So back to the DNA of your divine natural ability, not your limitations, your abilities, which are unlimited, right? So that's where this conversation is going, which is, well, if we're unlimited, what is it we use to limit ourselves, right? And so that's where we want to go. So let's do that, sir. What is it? What do we do? First of all, why do we limit ourselves? And what are the classic ways that we choose to incorporate these limitations?
Lou, I love what you just shared about being unlimited. Look, that's ultimately where we want to live. It's exciting. Our DNA, if I look at personalities, we were designed to be creators. we're designed by a creator, and therefore we share that DNA of being creators. So when we are creating, we are alive, we are vibrant, we're vibrating at a high frequency. That is when we are going to feel as though we're living out our destiny. Okay. And yet there are things that just get in the way that we may understand it intellectually. We may have read the books, gone to the seminars, done the treatments, go down the list of things that people do, all the way to crazy of trying to release themselves. And yet some people just are stuck. And so as I was working with my clients, these are high performers. These are leaders of Fortune 100 companies. Oftentimes they've gotten such a high level of success, and yet they know there's more in the tank. Mm-hmm. They know that they're capable of doing so much more, and yet they've hit a lid. They're stuck. And most of us, I think, have had that experience where, we come up against an obstacle and we struggle with it. We don't really, know how to conquer it. And we kind of end up circling back, and then it may be days, weeks, sometimes years. We come back and we find ourselves hitting that same wall again, right? And it's just typical life experience that we've done that. What is it that keeps us from being able to break through and break out? So let's just talk about that a little bit, because when you're living into your DNA, that's when you're living your core values, those guiding principles that you have in your life. You're utilizing your DNA, your divine natural abilities, at the highest level that you currently can, right? So that's what I would call excellence, is that you're leaving it all on the field. You're being your best self, right? Let's draw a couple of other distinctions. It's kind of the difference between living out of need and being a victim, fear. There's the big one, right? Living out of that. Or the opposite side is I'm living into my authentic self, that I am love, right? That I understand my why, and my life emanates from my why I'm here, and why I do what I do. So there's that dichotomy. And so a lot of times this is somewhat unconscious for us. And when I say unconscious, we've buried it. All right. For some reason. And we're going to go through 6 different categories. And I'm excited to have this conversation back and forth with you, Lou, on, how we're making decisions, how we prioritize what we're up to, whether it's personal or business life. These same 6 drivers, what I call core drivers, they come into play, and either they're working for us or they're working against us. Okay, so when we talk about the core drivers, I'm going to talk about them in a positive fashion, because they can be the fuel, right, that really drives us and causes us to rev our engines and move forward, or they can really become those barriers and those anchors that hold us back and bury us. And so a lot of times I'll talk about this from the perspective of this core driver. If it's out of control, or I'm not aware of it, or I haven't been willing to deal with it head on, it becomes a monster. Mm. And so the monster starts to be what people see, because that's this outward expression, versus the master. And think about everything that we think about as a sensei or a master, a guru, a maestro, whatever the mentor, whatever those words may be that you associate with that. That's a whole different feel, a whole different way and place of being. Okay. And so I know a lot of times you talk about magic, and so I want to throw this out. As I was thinking about our time today, I thought, okay, monster versus master. How about we go mayhem versus magic?
Nice.
Okay. And so when it's out of control, it's causing mayhem, right? Versus magic.
Nice.
So that's just kind of the preface. Any comments, Lou? I see you continuing to write, so jump right in here, or else I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, no, I love it. So so I'm getting these 30,000 foot view hits, and then also the detailed hits, right? Mm-hmm. So the 30,000 view hit is our life is a gift from the creator, but what we do with it is our gift back, right? And this is what you were starting off with, is so what's poured into us is what we have as that potential. Mm-hmm. And many of us, most people have had some experience that's caused us to then withdraw expressing this, right? Judgments, the fears, the need to be accepted, all that stuff. So we've played small, right? It's the whole Marianne Williamson quote of, yes, playing small doesn't serve the world, right? We were made of greatness. We all have greatness. We are greatness. Mm-hmm. And it's that stuff, and not from a place of narcissism, from a place of just authenticity, right? God don't make no junk kind of thing. And right. Have we taken the experiences that we might have bumped into that causes us to play small and go into mediocrity instead of excellence? And if we have, great. It's called welcome to the planet. What are you willing to do in order to move through those things and set yourself free to express only the gifts that you can express, and that you came here in this lifetime to do just that? So yeah, I'm anxious to hear these 6 core drivers and that double-edged sword, right? How do we use them? We have a gift. We have the ability to think, but we can also think things that create hell in our life, or we can think and bring into heaven in our life. And that's, we're the driver, right? So that's the whole, my adage, which is you're the driver, not the vehicle. Well, if you're driving, have you crashed into the ditch or are you sailing down the highway?
Mhm.
And that's on us, right? So this is where we get to the choice to come out of victimhood, quit blaming the world for your thoughts, actions, and outcomes, and take ownership, get back in the driver's seat, and recalibrate. So let's take it, brother. Let's hear it.
Well, and you know what? You're dancing on the edge here, and I want to just verbalize. I've driven into the ditch multiple times. And so as we're going through this, I think it's important just to give yourself grace. If one of these hits you hard and you're going, crap, that's me, that's what I struggle with. Okay, great. Remember what I said as we started. It's not about fixing what you think is wrong. Acknowledge it and then learn how to take that energy and shift it to propel you forward.
Boom.
Right.
100%.
And so when we talk about this monster, if you find one of these is your personal monster,
if not, I've got some I can loan you.
Yeah, I
can loan you some. If you're empty, if your closet's empty.
Yeah, we have monsters to share. But the reality is that it's not about killing the monster. Okay. It's somewhat about taming the monster, right? It's redirecting that energy. And so hear that these things that we're going to discuss, they're critical that you have a proper, positive God view of these things in your life and how they can propel you into your destiny, into your personal greatness, into the reason that you were placed on this planet at this exact moment with the people that you are surrounded with. And so I think that is just so critical that you understand it's not about killing the monster. It's about taming it in such a way that now it is a force for good and not evil in our life, that it's not creating mayhem, that we start to experience the magic that we were crafted and created to operate in.
Excellent. Jeffrey, I'm gonna tag on that one because the essence of the show, right? So Tao living, and Tao is the way, but also I use it as an acronym, TAO, the art of living. And in order to really do that, it requires a conscious choice, a conscious life. So you can't sail through, you can't even, and I say can't, it's impossible to live a conscious life playing victim. It doesn't work. And as Jeffrey said, is right. So neither one of us, all right, especially me, there is no judgment around this. As we're going through this, it's how do we get to upgrade? How do we get, I've done more of my share of drive. I think I was one of the inventors of the ditch. I mean, I drove off the road so many times. I created the ruts, right? So yeah, there's none of that. It's going, hey, how, right? And that's why we're here, is to use our experiences of driving off the ditch or into it or creating one and going, okay, been there, done that. How, one, why did I go off? And then how did I get back? Both of those are essential. And back to the monster thing is, let's not play that as a victim, like some monsters attacking us. No. It's feedback. So, or mayhem and magic. If I'm experiencing mayhem, that's where I'm leading myself. And it's just a reframe and a shift of thought and intention to get me into magic. If I'm not in the process of mastering my life and I have a monster, it's not because something outside of me is torturing me. It's me creating this because of what I'm focusing on. My thoughts, my wounds, my traumas, my limitations, whatever it is. And that's why I'm going to keep bringing that. So I become a crap magnet, right?
Yeah.
This is an abundance magnet because of that same process. So I appreciate you reframing that place. We don't need to kill anything. It's feedback of what we are expressing and focusing on.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So good. And so I want to just take these, Lou, one at a time, and let's banter back and forth on these. And as we go through these 6 core drivers, again, we all have these, but we're going to start kind of at the base level and move up, because as we become higher functioning, as we become more self-actualized, as we are really living fully into our DNA, some of the higher level ones come into play. But just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't have food and shelter, it's hard to think about what is your contribution to the global good, right? And it's the same thing with your core drivers. They kind of start at this base level and they move up this hierarchy. Okay, so the first one we're going to start with is our need for security, certainty, making sure things are done the right way. Now, just think about that in your life for a second. What are those things that you derive comfort in because they're certain for you, that you've decided this is the way it is, and you've drawn the line in the sand, that it's predictable, it's recurring, that you derive a sense of security because it's not shifting sands. It's rock. It's something you can really plant yourself on, right? So not only is this beliefs as we go through these core drivers, because we all have beliefs around each one of these, but it's the emotional response, because ultimately it is the emotions we have about these 6 core drivers that are impacting and driving our behavior. Okay. So, Lou, when you think about security, certainty, things being the right way, what comes to mind for you right off the bat?
For me personally, or how the world sees it?
Well, either way.
So for me, that's why I asked, because for me, security, unfortunately, as the world's driven, is outside in. So security would be house and finances, safety, money, right? Or I said finances. And so that's the gift of the teaching through the art of living, is the only true security is inside out.
100%. And yet people do have woundedness around these things where they've been in situations where they haven't felt secure.
100%.
So sometimes it's because maybe they grew up in lack. I have a lot of people I've worked with that, they have everything that they could imagine now, but they still look at life from those lenses of that little kid that went to bed hungry because there was no food to eat in the house.
There's still not enough.
It's never enough.
Never enough.
And so, I want to be a millionaire. They hit 1 million. Okay, now 10 million. Okay, 100 million. It's never enough because they're still stuck in that need for security, and they've never gone back to redefine what that is and even dealt with it. Right.
And Jeff, so this is a question too, because as I'm looking at clients that I work with where they've got 7 degrees, like literally 4 masters and 3 PhDs, and it's still not enough. And that place is the driving force of to prove, right? So yes. Is to prove connected to security in this format? Is that not going to be another driver?
It can actually cross over in several drivers.
Okay.
And you'll see this, it comes up in a couple of the future ones. People do things for lots of different reasons. And I'm not going to tell you that it's always one of these drivers. It could be a mix of the two, right? But these are typically there's one of these that is central. It's the trigger that whenever you're having mayhem in your life, you can trace it back to one of these, right? And there's usually one that's dominant. And that's just been from my work over 28 years or so now. In trying to figure out, why does this high performer keep hitting this wall? What is it that's stopping them from moving forward? And this is common to all of us. This is the condition of man, if you will, right? And to become masters, to really transcend the distractions that plague us on this planet. To transcend this and really live a spiritual life and to really have a full expression of our true self, our authentic self, you have to deal with these. That is, it's not an option, right? And so I'll give you another example of this one with certainty. I was working with a gentleman who is a financial planner, and because he has experienced lack in his past, right? Because he wants to be certain that there's always enough, he tends to be conservative, right? So he's very conservative with his finances, with his material possessions, with everything. Everything is uber conservative. Well, what do you think happens when someone comes to them and they say, hey, I want you to be my portfolio manager. I want you to manage my financial investments. And I want to be aggressive. I want to go out there and I really want to live on the cutting edge. This is money. Look, if I lose it, I lose it. I just want to go out there and play in the market and really make some big returns. What do you think happens?
Well, either he's not going to accept him as a client or he's going to convince that guy that they need to go conservative.
And ultimately, he may lose them.
Right.
Right? Because they didn't line up with his own personal need and how he operates because of that need for certainty, right? That need for security. So I tried to give something that was a little less emotional, but there's a lot of things that people have endured where, maybe they have had some sort of emotional or physical abuse in their past, and they just didn't have physical security, or they just don't trust that people are not going to harm them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about how that impacts everything in their life. Right? I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there. I've shared my story several times, but I at one point was shipped off to a new school because of situations happening in my hometown, and I was the outsider. I was the outcast. I was the unwanted, and I watched the clock every day when it would hit 3 o'clock, and the bell would ring because school was over, and I dreaded 3 o'clock. Because I knew that the bullies were going to be waiting for me when I walked out, and I got beat up every single day in 5th grade. Every single day. Wow. I mean, I didn't feel that security, and it caused me to shut down. Absolutely shut down emotionally. And it really impacted me in 2 different areas of core drivers where I didn't reach out. I didn't make the relationships and the connections that I could have or that I needed to feel secure, because all I knew was 3 o'clock, I'm getting beat up again. Right? And that took years and years for me to come to grips with and to overcome and to start to trust again and to really be able to reach out and build relationships. But I'll tell you, even to this day, my tendency will be to be introverted and to watch and to stand back a little bit, because I've got to feel the situation out because of that lack of security that I felt. And quite frankly, I want to be secure. We all do, right? We all want to have that feeling. And so I have my ways of kind of measuring and deciding who's it safe to be around, and then making those choices of who's in my inner circle and who's not. So that, again, I'm in charge now. I'm mastering it. The monster doesn't have control.
Beautiful. Jeffrey, on that, I want to say something to the audience, which is, as you're listening to this conversation, I asked you right now is to check in, I've watched a lot of people identify, well, that's just my nature. Well, your innate nature is a whole different story than your character that you've created because of life experiences. So be mindful of justifying how you show up in the world as your nature versus patterns that you still haven't processed over. So like in this case, if Jeffrey hadn't done the work that he's done, then he would be constantly on the introverted side and barely interact with people or create healthy relationships because of the trauma of being beat up at 3 o'clock. Here comes the beating, right?
Yeah.
And so the distrust of people and versus going, okay, that was an experience that I had. That was a group of people. And that I got to learn the lessons from that, overcome that, move up, yada, yada, yada. But now that's not my nature. It might cause me to reflect differently as he does now as an adult. So again, I don't want to belabor that. I just asking everybody that's listening is just do some self-inventory, because I find a lot of people making justifications around, well, that's just my nature. Is it? And are you willing to do some work to maybe modify that? Especially if it's a nature that's causing you to live into your DNA, run it, right? But if it's a quote unquote nature that's part of this sabotage of expressing these abilities, have the courage to look at it. That I guess that's where I was going. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, you just brought something else up for me, Lou, and that is, when I think about this need for the right way, think about the person that is a control freak because maybe they lacked the ability to control their environment or their circumstances in the past. And so now they try to control everything within a 100-mile radius. Right. And so they can, with this sense of pride, talk about, well, I'm doing it this way because it's the right way. Right. But really, they're in bondage to the monster, right? The monster that says you have to control everything, versus right way exhibiting itself in, these are my guiding principles, these are my core values, and I am behaving this way. I declare it's the right way because it's consistent, it's congruent, it's my authentic self. That's a world of difference between those two expressions of the need for right way, right? So I just want to give that continuum, because you need to understand, both sides and where you are along that line, and where you want to go.
100%, Jeffrey. And this is, and I don't want to deviate too much because otherwise we'll never get through the 6 core drivers. He'll be back for the third time just to finish the drivers. That aspect where, so 2600 BC, they taught all the kids in school in Greece critical thinking, right? Or logic. We don't do that anymore. So people, including myself, I wasn't given the gifts of critical thinking. I grew up in the educational system of memorize and regurge. Therefore, I didn't think. I was taught how to think. And a lot of that teaching me how to think was not congruent to who I am and on that higher plane of who I am. So I started running patterns and even behaviors or actions that were not authentically me. So just like you have, it took me a long time to do lots of work to identify what is really me. What do I identify with, back to these core, not just the core drivers, our core values, right? How do I define integrity? How do I define honesty and loyalty? Me, not how society told me what it looks like.
Right.
And how do I live into that? So again, for those who are listening, that's something to really get clear on, as Jeffrey was just espousing to, which is, who are you in your authentic self, right? Back to the DNA. And are you living into that? And if you haven't identified that, you could still be living into somebody's version of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just saying.
And hey, again, a plug for this podcast. You're providing that education, that information, that direction that we didn't get in the traditional education system, right? No one taught us how to free our minds. We were taught how to put the chains on, right? We weren't encouraged to be creative, because then you were labeled a problem in the classroom, right? You just need to sit there, don't get up, and wait for the bell to ring, right, to go to recess, right? And that's not what this podcast is all about. It's bringing the latest, greatest information to set us all free to really having the impact that we were designed to have. Period. Simple. End of discussion. Right. And so thank you, Lou. I really want to congratulate you and encourage you just to keep going, push the limits, because we need you. We need your message. We need what you're bringing to the planet, because this is about freedom. And not long ago, someone asked me, well, over this last year, what's been the most important thing to you? And I said, freedom. And all of a sudden they went off on, well, that's not the right answer. Your health is the most important thing. And I just beg to differ, because the gift of freedom, and I would say the gift that we each can give ourselves permission to finally be free.
Mm-hmm. Whew. Can I get an AM on an AM, an amen on a, what is it, Wednesday, Thursday? Well, I don't even know what day this is. Yeah, can I get an amen on a Wednesday morning here, Wednesday afternoon? Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. Thank you, sir. But that's why I have amazing guest speakers like you on here to bring your brilliance to the people. So, second driver.
Yeah, let's just keep on rolling. Variety or challenge. Variety or challenge. Now, how you respond to this could actually even, I'm going to give you another perspective here. It could lead you into certain vocations. Okay? Because think about someone who doesn't like change, that doesn't want variety, they want things to be predictable, right? Hey, how about someone that is an accountant or a CPA? There's laws about how you do debits, credits, you do the accounting, everything is in a box. It's already been defined. There's no deviation, right? And so if they really avoid variety, right? They avoid anything that would be challenging or changing. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. All right. That's just your response to this need. It is still a core driver. So I don't want to just set us up to say one side is good and one side is bad. They're even on the spectrum. It's how we decide to have a healthy relationship with this need or this driver. Does that make sense, Lou?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. And so when you look at that, that could be your vocation and you're really good at what you do. And if that's your giftedness and that's the place you're supposed to be, fantastic. The flip side of that coin are those people that constantly need change. They constantly are looking for variety. They get bored with anything that's a routine, right? And so what you'll find is that if they're placed into a team or a situation where routine begins to occur, they're going to cause mayhem. They're going to stir the pot, right? Sometimes they're, especially in school, they're troublemakers, right? They're labeled, right? No, it's just that you're trying to shove them into a box that they don't want to get into,
right?
Right? And so now, again, when we look at what we would call behaviors that don't serve us, right? I don't want to call them negative behaviors, but that they don't move us forward. They don't move us toward our best self. At some point, we would hope that person that's always stirring the pot and causing mayhem, and believe me, that's the perspective of the person who doesn't like variety, right? That person is a troublemaker. They're causing mayhem. But at some point, you'll find that they gravitate to a more creative field where they're constantly having new challenges and new opportunities to express that need. So you think about someone that maybe is a marketing executive and they're always looking for some new way to message and promote a message and to move it forward. I don't want the person as my marketing executive to be the person that is in the box and does the same thing that's been done for 50 years, right? That's not going to work. But then you have this person that needs that expression. And so they're naturally going to gravitate to a different vocation because of that. But again, I see people that within a family structure even is that maybe they're in relationship with someone that absolutely wants to live inside the box, and they're in a relationship with someone who's never met a box they like. Conflict, butting heads. And they each tend to label and start to have accusations back and forth of what's going on. And yet, if they would both sit down and be honest with themselves and each other about, here's what I need, this is what drives me, this is why I am the way I am, right? This is why I've chosen this path, this way of being. Then there's hope. There's hope for a very vibrant, amazing relationship, because the person who's in the box, just sometimes they need that excitement of the person that's outside the box. And guess what? The person that's always living outside the box, sometimes they need to have a string tied to the planet so they don't float away, right? And so either that can be a beautiful relationship, or it can be one that just is constant conflict.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, as Jeffrey's pointing out here, this is critical in all of our relationships, and obviously, the more intimate, the more necessary. So, the law of physics is opposites attract. So, those things bring us together. Yet, when that stays in proximity for too long without understanding, as Jeffrey just described, then it can come into polarity and start banging heads. Versus an understanding of these natural rhythms, and then learning to process that. It's like, hey, my partner chooses to be more grounded and chill out, whereas I'm often flying, and I need them to ground me periodically, and I need to put some wind under their feet so they get up and roll now and then. So, and that's where it serves each other. So understanding those flows and learning to communicate them and respect them is where the possibility of a beautiful relationship comes in for sure.
And there's a richness in this.
Mm-hmm.
And in with all of these needs, as we find ways to have proper expression within these drivers, there's absolutely a richness and a depth to our living that is so exciting. And so let's keep going, or like you said, we're going to be days on this podcast. But the next one, importance or significance. Importance or significance. It's a driver. Okay. I'm going to give you another somewhat benign example. Imagine that you're at work and you're in a team meeting. Okay. If you have someone who has a really high need to be seen as important or significant, what's their behavior in the meeting?
Pay attention to me. So always showing up, always saying something, and whatever that is, by interruptions, it might not be helpful information, but some kind of action to be acknowledged, to be seen.
Yes. I mean, they never met a pause that they didn't want to fill. Right. And so you see that starting to happen, right? Versus somebody who that's just not a driver for them. Their behavior is absolutely different. They're able to listen, process, give feedback when necessary, but they're not driven by that need. So I want to use this again to do another distinction, is that as we're talking about these, it's that internal drive, that energy that's inside of us that generates behavior. Okay, so we have this emotional response. So in this case, we're talking about importance and significance. How does that express itself? Okay, I'm going to give you a great positive example that I experienced a few years ago. Many of you probably know who Simon Sinek is, and just the importance of understanding your why and moving forward. And I'm a big fan of Simon. And there was a shooting in a school here in South Florida. And Simon, when you look at some of his core values and his own motivations, he really is driven by this sense of needing to be significant in making a difference in the world. And the significance that he has chosen to bring is peace. And so when you think about his message around why, understanding your why and operating from your why gives you a sense of peace that you otherwise cannot attain. Okay. And so one of the things that he did uninvited was get on a plane, fly from New York down to South Florida, walk onto that campus, into the principal's office, and to say, I'm here to serve. Who needs to talk? Who needs to be consoled? Who needs to be able to process? I'm here to help them do that and to get peace on the other side of this horrible event that had occurred. That is a proper response to that need for significance. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And that has just impacted me over and over again, that when he heard about what it was, he was driven by his higher self, right? To come and do that. No promotion. Here I am telling his story, but he hasn't told that story from any stage. He didn't want any recognition. It was him living out that driver. Okay. So there's just a beautiful example for me of what that looks like when it's
authentically expressed.
That's the magic,
yeah.
Not the mayhem. right? That authentic self, living in the magic. Okay. Comments, Lou?
No, I'm good.
All right. We're going to keep on rolling. And again, as we're moving down this list, they may have a little less intensity. All I'm saying is that whichever one is the one that comes up most frequently for you, that's the one you get to spend time meditating, ideating on, and coming up with new ways to redirect that energy, right? And there's no one better to help you do that than Lou. But the reality is that each of these are just, again, an expression of a need that we have as human beings on this planet. And so how do we get it so that it serves us instead of harming us? The next one is our need for love, connection, and trust. Love, connection, and trust. Okay, wow. And for a lot of us, this is a biggie, right? And so you go back to past woundedness, whatever may have gone on in our family dynamic. This one is a biggie for a lot of people. Lou, when I say those three words to you, what immediately comes to mind? Love, connection, trust.
Actually, what really comes to mind is the beautiful work that Don Miguel Ruiz did in the Four Agreements, and how the book started, which is our misperception of love through acceptance, right? So when the domestication of the human being, when as kids we then look, because of this energy of love that we bathe in, we look for it to experience it, but authentically. Yet by the people we tend to be around, it tends to get even unconsciously manipulated. So we start selling ourselves out in order to have this acceptance, to this need to be needed, under the perception of love. And that's where this continuation of harming ourselves to be accepted, to be liked, which then over time causes the wounds. Then we stop trusting because we blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Exactly. So 100% that, and back to this balance of how are these categories of love, connection? First of all, is just remembering, right, that we are love. We don't have to do anything to get it. We are that. And connection is everywhere with all things. It's just to, simply by acknowledging it, the connections improve. When you perceive that you're disconnected, that's where the suffering incurs, right? Yeah, so I can go down that rabbit hole a lot, and I won't.
No, I love the synergy here, because again, what I really want to highlight here is external versus internal. Okay, that's just another key distinction as we look at core drivers. Either we're searching for love, the old song, looking for love in all the wrong places, or we are love, right? That's a huge distinction, because if we are love, I don't have to go anywhere to look for it. It's already here. I'm here, therefore it's here.
Even in the classic scenarios where in relationships, like, here's my better half, here's my other half. So be mindful of these statements, people, because when we show up that way, what happens when this person leaves, either for whatever reason, like they pass on, they've made their transition, you're now half of a person, or they leave their relationship for whatever reason, you're now half a person. That's just not a healthy way to be, right?
No. So
always stay whole in any relationship, show up fully, and then just let the two become better than one, but don't be half of one.
So how often have we heard the story, Lou, where a spouse dies and within a day or two, the other one dies?
100%.
Because they couldn't live without their other half. So it has fatal consequences. It doesn't work to be half a person. But this whole idea of if you create an environment of trust, because that is how you're showing up, then you will attract people that are trustworthy.
And this topic right now, so before we hit play, Jeffrey and I were having a conversation, and it was up in our communication. Right now, at the time of this recording, trust is at an all-time low, and it's driven because of the fear that media is promulgating on people. Don't trust your neighbor. Don't trust yourself. Don't even trust your own body. Don't trust yourself that you can handle the environment. Don't trust the neighbor because they're going to make you ill. And so there's this massive amount of distrust that is intentionally being driven.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep exposing yourself to that, you're going to start believing it, and you're going to start distrusting your neighbor, yourself, your own kids, your own family. And it's just a crime against humanity. Stop listening to it and go back within and remember who you be, and re-engage in acts of trust. Otherwise, you're going to fulfill the nightmare that these players of this narrative want to see fulfilled.
Yes. Yes. Well, and back to languaging, and we know how important that is, Lou, is that it's not that you're looking for love and you want to feel this connection that if only you had someone you could trust. How about just the real simple act of, I am love. I am connection. I am trust. That is how I show up. That is who I am on the planet. And guess what? Your whole environment changes.
Yeah, the whole Gandhian thing, right? Be the change you wish to see in the world. So if you want more trust,
so just be
more trusting, right? Show up more trusting, not naivety, not
no.
Yeah.
And again, when you are trust, it's very easy to see those people that you don't want in your circle, right? Because it becomes black and white in many scenarios. But again, in this one, it really is that difference of being externally focused or internally focused. And how does that drive you? And if you're looking for love, connection, and trust outside of you, you'll always be miserable. It will always lead you to have some, a lot of times addictive behaviors. And this is the perfect scenario for someone to be codependent, from, the term that was within recovery that's bounced around, is that person that needs to be needed. And so if I do all these things, then they're going to love me, or they're going to want me around. And, all this craziness that happens if we would just go internal and realize who we be.
100%.
This one takes a whole different slant. And now that energy is moving us toward that higher self. So next one.
Last piece before Jeffrey shares number 5. And that is, this is a deep insider secret here. Have you ever said, because I know I did decades ago, that person makes me feel so good? When we're talking about, let's say, love, right? Oh my gosh, just being in them, I feel so alive. I feel so this, I feel that. It's not the person, it's you, right? And when they go away, you're going to feel bad again. Remember that. Now, that person might be expressing something that you then allow to express in your own self, which is why you do feel good when you're around or near them, no doubt. But it's still you. They can't make you do that. Just like somebody can't make you feel bad or feel good. That is on you. Take ownership of your life. So back to this driver, be the love, right? Be the connection and be the trust.
Yes.
Sorry for the interruption. Yes. Please, number 5.
Well, if we stopped right here, that last one was gold. Right there. If you did nothing else, you took nothing else away from this podcast, it's be love, be connection, be trust. That would impact virtually the entirety of your life, every aspect. Let's run over these last 2. And again, remember, this is on a hierarchy. And so now we're getting a little more evolved, if you will, but that need for growth, to make things better, for mastery. Okay. That's a need that a driver that propels a lot of people that, as you were saying earlier, Lou, some of these people that they've got 15 degrees and they're 68 years old and they're still in university. Right. And it's just that there's a need for growth and mastery in that scenario that has taken charge of their life, that they never lived their life because they've been preparing for something and they lost sight of what they were preparing for and what that end game was. Right. And so I need to know more. Something new came up and I have to pursue that. And I think I want a degree over here too. We all know some of these people. We've all been that person probably at some point in our life where, we're just so involved in making something better that we lose sight of the big picture of really having impact and really making a difference. I see this oftentimes in business where someone can get so wrapped up in the minutia of the day-to-day operations and the systems and the processes and whatever, and they forget, hey, you know what? If we're not making a profit, then the company doesn't have the money to pay my salary. Therefore, I'm out on the street. So at some point, what I'm doing needs to add value and somehow impacts the bottom line with generating income for the company, right?
So, ladies and gentlemen, just as Jeffrey's taking a breath there, a reminder of the double-edged sword of the drivers, right? He said this in the very beginning, but I just want to bring it back into forefront and context. So the example of this person who's 16 degrees and going after more, when the driver is, I'm a professional student, but I'm not applying it. That's the driver working against self.
Yes.
The process of mastery is actually an amazing process when we're also taking the wisdom that we've obtained through this process of mastery, and it's in application as well. That's a whole different expression, right? So how are we using the driver of that double-edged sword, right? For or against us?
Absolutely.
In a healthy or detrimental way. And that's the magic to be mindful of. So,
yeah. And thank you, Lou, for going there, because that's why people are listening to this podcast. I hope there's that sense of they really have a desire to master their life expression, their impact, their legacy, that when they leave this planet was different because they were here. And that is the impact that a master, a sensei, a guru has. And that's where all of us were designed and created to live, is in that realm of mastery, because mastery equates to impact. And I will say that all day long, that as we become higher and higher levels, achieve higher levels of mastery, our impact is directly related to that. And so,
and remember, that's across the board what Jeffrey's talking about. So if you're a parent, mastering parenting is a Jedi trait, right? Because you're going to then create amazing children who will become amazing people on this planet. So whatever your vocation is, the artist, the contractor, right? The business person, the entrepreneur, however you choose to show up in the world, that's your beautiful expression. Doesn't matter. So, I can't be a master. Nonsense. We can master everything because we're first mastering ourselves. And as Absolutely. We do that, right, it's who you be supersedes what you do. So as we master self, then as we express that in whatever that vehicle that we choose to do it in, the teacher, the preacher, whatever that is, that's great. But first and foremost, us working on self. And that's the beauty of understanding these core drivers. So thank you, sir.
Absolutely. And let's face it, mastery is an eternal process. There is no end to mastery, right? And look, Lou, I know that you're constantly pushing yourself and pushing the limits and stretching yourself in new ways, as do I. And for any of us that are on this journey and we understand that we have an obligation. I'll speak for myself. I really believe I have an obligation to have a full expression of my talents, gifts, and abilities, because if I don't, I've harmed the people around me. There was something that could have occurred that would have shifted the time-space continuum. I mean, that's the reality. And if I don't deliver that, the world is worse off because of that. And so I feel it as an obligation that this process of mastery is never ending. And, as Tony Robbins would say, it's the canai, right? The constant and never ending improvement. But improvement doesn't really capture that for me. It really is the process of mastery and saying, how can I have the fullest and best expression of who I be? Again, stealing Lou's terminology there. So,
the top of the food chain.
Yeah. So let's go to this next one. And it's that whole sense of impact and contribution,
Mm.
right? And this is, if you're starting to look at self-actualization and that higher expression, you know, what are you here to do? And what is that level of impact? And again, when we're talking about this drive, right? This is, again, is one of those where we're looking at the external versus the internal. Some people are operating off of shoulds and must and have tos. That has a very different expression than someone who is committed to their very best self, that is wanting to give and to love and to make a difference. Hear the change there, the dichotomy of those two. Some part of it is one is external and one is internal, and yet we can be driven by either. And so what is that impact, that contribution that you are passionate about? And then I would ask you, why are you passionate about that?
Mm-hmm.
Go back and dig a little deeper, because, we can say, well, I'm passionate about homeless people, and there can be lots of expressions about that. But what is driving you? Because I know that the end result, your true contribution and impact in the end, is a multiplier based on where that energy is coming from. And so if there's something selfish, or there's some need, there's some woundedness from the past that's driving that in you, then your impact is much, much less than if you're coming from that place that is more altruistic, that is really committed to loving every man, woman, and child on the planet, that you want to see others be released and to operate into freedom, instead of being in bondage to whatever that is, that whether it's poverty or slavery or whatever the case may be, right? And so just think of that. I know philanthropists that give millions and millions of dollars, but they do it out of guilt.
Mm. Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is to honor your time. We're gonna, as a healing practitioner for decades around these patterns, this is something, and this is what Jeffrey's been alluding to in the very beginning as well, which is so that old adage, what got us here can't get us there. So we might have had a driver that got us to safety, that got us to success. But if we don't heal what was driving us, that was out of balance, it will now become, as what Jeffrey called, the monster, right? Mm-hmm. So it might have done that. So if I was the kid that was picked on into school, and then I became a self-defense instructor to help people not get abused, that made me become successful. But if I haven't gotten on the other side of the original driver, it now tears me down, and it ends up breaking me down, literally. Successful people, Jeffrey and I have both worked with them as clients, who've become ultra successful. It was because out of a broken need of not being able, they didn't have food on the table, they didn't have the money to go to school, and they drew that line in the sand. I will never experience this again. And they became ultra successful, but they never nipped the original driver in the butt. And now they're tearing themselves down, and they drink themselves into the grave, or they destroy all their relationships. Because because it wasn't ever addressed. So be mindful that this initial driver will get you momentum out of the craziness or the intensity that you might have experienced, which caused the momentum in the first place. That's beautiful. But if you're not mindful to then address it and, quote unquote, heal it, so it becomes a productive use and a productive tool, it will take you out as well.
Yeah. And I know we need to land this plane. Last distinction that I think is critical when we're talking about core drivers: when we haven't dealt with the monster, when that energy is still there and it's pushing us forward, I want people to realize that there's usually fear involved in that, and it's a moving away from. We are running away from something. So that energy that drives us, we're looking in the rearview mirror. We're trying to stay one step ahead of something we're trying to get away from, right? Think of the monster chasing you. I mean, that's really it. So you're reacting to something and you're running away from it. That's a very different way of living than moving toward your destiny, moving toward what you have chosen as your life expression and what you want to be, the contribution that you want to make. The moving toward a fuller expression of who you are. So you're either moving away from or you're moving toward, you're moving to something else. Mm-hmm. And so with all of these drivers, ultimately, we want to fashion them and have a relationship with each one of these where now we take that energy and we move toward those things that are the full expression of ourself. And we're bringing our DNA, our divine natural abilities to bear to have impact that changes the world.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Just that simple summary there. Well, it wasn't simple. That eloquent summary there, ladies and gentlemen, as you're listening, which is whatever it is you're using, are you using it to avoid and run away or to move towards? That is the quintessential summary of the whole process, right? So to honor everybody's time, Jeffrey's, because he's got clients he needs to connect with, those who are listening, please reach out to Jeffrey. So I'll have in the episode below the recording here, the audio, you'll see his contact in writing. So please share the website you would like them to reach out to engage with you.
Go to beyondexpert.biz, and you can connect with me there. There's links to get on my calendar, and we can have a one-on-one and see how we can get you moving toward those things that matter to you.
And that's beyond, BEYOND, expert.biz for business, like business biz.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that hyperlink will also be below this episode. And so thank you for taking your time, sir, out of your intense schedule to share with the listeners. And listeners, I appreciate you guys tuning in. And if this resonates, share it with other people so they know that this is available and they can have access to. And hit the subscribe so you stay connected to the episodes that continue to come out. And once again, thank you for your time, sir. Thank you, everybody else, for listening to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast. And until next time, abundant blessings. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living podcast, the Art of Living. Now go to loucorletto.com, LOUCORLETO.com to receive your free training, the operator's manual for your vehicle. See, when you buy a phone, you get a manual. When you buy a car, you get a manual. When you entered your body, no manual. Let me teach you how it's really designed to work. Also, help me help others and share this podcast far and wide. And subscribe